I'm Nick Curtis. I'm here at the Ham Yard Hotel with Ruth Wilson to talk about a very royal scandal on Prime Video. Hello, Ruth. How are you?
Hello, Nick. How are you?
It's always nice to see you.
It is indeed.
And very interesting to talk to you about this. So in this you play Emily Maitlis through the course of securing and then doing the interview with Prince Andrew for Newsnight. Well, how did you first get involved and what attracted you to it?
The script came to me and I'd seen the original interview back in 2019 and I remember it being as one of the best pieces of drama I'd seen on TV.
Yeah.
I mean, it captivated me for the whole hour.
Yes.
I felt deeply uncomfortable watching it. I thought it was funny at moments. I thought, wow, it's extraordinary. And the biggest question was, how on earth did that come about?
Yes.
So when the screenplay came through, well, one, I've never played a public figure before, so I thought that was a challenge in itself. And Emily, I've watched many times on Newsnight. So
Yes.
it'll be really interesting to sort of investigate and play her and be in that world of journalism. But then the interview itself was really fascinating. I thought it was a real character study could be a real character study of Andrew, actually, Prince Andrew. And reading the scripts, I was like, okay, it's not just you can't replicate that interview. It's so good, why would you bother? You don't need to. But if we can ask questions around it and reveal things outside of just the interview, that's really interesting to me. And when I read the script, I thought, oh, yeah, it's fascinating seeing how this interview came about.
Yes.
What happens, how did journalists get an interview that almost, it didn't happen a number of times.
Yes.
I liked seeing behind the curtain in Emily's world. Of course, everything Andrew's world is speculative. And also I loved the third episode, which is about the consequences of this interview.
Yes.
Did it really have the impact it hoped to have? Was it just an event piece of TV?
Right. In terms of repercussions, you mean?
Repercussions,
Nothing...
of course, repercussions for Prince Andrew and his family, but repercussions for Emily and Newsnight. But generally, there's unresolved issues.
Yes.
It hasn't been resolved.
There's no closure.
There's no closure. There's no neat bow. There's no sort of triumph. It's still a question over it about whether he is or isn't guilty, about what's happened with the other Epstein's other victims.
Yes.
So there's lots of questions that still haven't been answered, and that's what this drama poses as well.
I see. You mentioned it's your first time playing a living public figure. I know you played your own grandmother on TV before, but what are the responsibilities and challenges of that? Yeah,
it's intimidating in some way because, of course, there's an element, you have to replicate what people recognise, and there's a pressure on that, obviously, or an expectation on that. And that's quite technical, some of that stuff, which I don't consider myself a very technical actor, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the process. And I worked with a great voice coach, William Conacher, and a great movement coach, Alex Reynolds, who both, we both studied Emily and everything about Emily. And it was really fun. It's a bit like when you've got a novel, you've got really brilliant raw material.
Yeah.
And more, it's better than your imagination could ever be.
Right.
So in that way, it just was a gift. Emily was kind of a gift that kept giving because it was like, wow, she's so brilliantly human.
Yeah.
And I could just play on all those things. And what I loved, she was so generous with her time. I met her, I went to watch her at Newsagents.
Yes.
I interviewed her, which was pretty intimidating.
Yes.
And like you were talking about the responsibilities of playing someone in the public eye or someone real and alive, is that her sensitivities around certain things, like her family or things like that, I took seriously and didn't want to go anywhere that wasn't comfortable for her.
Right.
But what we found also was like, I was seeing behind the curtain of this woman that's in a serious industry, who seemingly is, has to interview serious people about serious things, but she is extraordinarily light and fun and a kind of force of nature.
Yeah.
So playing her was really fun, and showing those two sides was great, and getting to go home and be in her domestic life and show her chaos as well as the focus. All that was brilliantly fun to do, and I loved playing her. Absolutely adored it.
Did you compare notes with Michael Sheen, who plays Prince Andrew beforehand, who is fairly adept at playing living public figures?
I mean, I did ask him. I said, "What's your advice around playing public figures?" And he always just said, "Well, it's, that he doesn't like to ever stick on too many things or disguise himself too much. It's like, you study the character, you'll get all those nuance, and hopefully the audience end up, you might not look anything like the person, but by the end they're sort of fully committed to the character you've created.
Yes.
And it is interpretive what we do. It's like, it won't ever be an accurate, well, for me, I didn't ever give myself the pressure of being a complete mimic. It was more like trying to find an essence of her and reveal things to the audience that they don't often see.
Yes.
And, land an area that is comfortable for me to perform. So it's a mix of Emily, it's a mix of Jeremy's work and me, and in that something comes out.
Yes, I understand, yeah. Did it concern you at all, this is the second drama based on a video, based on an interview that a lot of people will have watched? So you lose a lot of element of surprise, don't you? You know how it ended, even if there is no resolution.
Well, we all know what the original interview is out there. So there could be a question as to why put that back on the screen. I think I did know that other show was going on. I read our script and thought it was actually a very different beast. And it goes, really, Andrew and Emily are the two figures that you go behind the curtain with.
Yes.
In Scoop, they're a bit more periphery. And I think also our show sort of really deals with the consequences of the fallout, not only for Prince Andrew and his family, but of course for Newsnight, Emily, and the bigger questions at the heart of it. So I thought that ours dealt slightly different material and was approaching it, in just as an interesting way, but a sort of different way.
Yes.
So I wasn't worried because it was enough for me to take the job. I knew the other one was happening. I read that script. I read this script.
Did you watch it, the other one? You
haven't seen it. I didn't.
Gillian Anderson's performance.
No, I was like, I'm not going to go near. I mean, Gillian's amazing, and I didn't want to sort of go near that and let that inform me. So I just thought, I'll watch it later.
I read the interview you gave to Emily recently, where you talked about being possibly a royalist, and I wondered if your view of Prince Andrew or of the monarchy had changed through the course of this, or how you felt about him as well after this.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I sort of, it's hard to know whether you claim yourself as a royalist or not. I mean, they just exist, and that's part of what you've grown up with. It's sort of, I can't quite imagine the country without them. So, they're part and parcel of who we all are as British people.
Yes.
Yes. So it's quite hard to decide whether you're a royalist or not, because I sort of think they're just there.
They're just there.
Yeah, and so you sort of, I think what did come about for me, having done this show and working on it, was sort of how royals have become entertainment, and how news has become entertainment.
Yeah.
And we are the consumers of that. So we're complicit in how much they are entertainment in a way. And I think what we question in this show is that event, again, I keep saying about whether it actually had the impact it intended to have. Has anything changed, really? Or is it just a piece of entertainment that everyone memed about and talked about, and Pizza Express and sweating?
Not being able to sweat.
Yeah, and once that becomes the story, and once Emily's interview becomes the story, perhaps the real victims of it are forgotten about, and the real story is forgotten. So I actually think I started to look at the sort of relationship from doing the show, the relationship between royals, press, and us as the consumer. And that is so specific to this nation.
Yes.
It doesn't really exist anywhere else. And how sort of we're all reliant on each other.
Yes. And also how little the different aspects understand one another. I mean, it's extraordinary that Andrew walked into that interview, don't you think? I mean, how did you feel about that?
Well, that's what I mean. It's the idea of like how you can be so unaware of what that... I mean, that's the biggest question with me. How did you... This wasn't going to be a fluff piece of interview. This is Newsnight with Emily Maitlis. It's not going to be easy questioning.
No.
So how you didn't go into that... I mean, maybe he was as prepared as he... Maybe he was incredibly prepared. We don't really know what the process was. But it didn't seem like he was.
No.
Or it didn't seem like he kind of understood the stakes of the situation. That's extraordinary to me.
Yes. I know this sort of flies in the face of what we were saying about there being no resolution for the victims or alleged victims of, what we're talking about around here. But did you feel sorry for him at all at any stage? I mean, you talked, I think, about him walking into his own grave without...
Yeah, I think, I think there's a sense of... I mean, the way... I I think there's a lot of empathy in the piece, actually. I mean, the way that Michael's sort of performed him and how Jeremy was sort of analysing this. I mean, you know, the guy feels trapped in his own world. He might be privileged and everything else, but he feels a man that's hard done by as well. And I understand why he wanted to do the interview. You know, someone who he's been talked about, speculated about, front page of every paper. He wants to tell his story. He wants his voice to be heard. I mean, anyone would. So I can totally understand why he did it. I just don't know how he was allowed to,
Yes.
or how he did it with no understanding of the stakes, or how he wasn't prepared for those kind of questions. And there's some part of you that feels that he was sort of trying to be a good soldier in that, sitting there. He didn't get up and leave, which he could have done. So some part of you thinks maybe he was trying to please Emily in some way, or trying to be a
good chap.
A good chap.
Yes.
By fulfilling and staying there throughout the whole interview.
There is that sense that he sees himself as a good and honourable chap, doesn't he? There is that extraordinary quote about him being too honourable. To break up with his friendship with Epstein.
And Emily, and we put it in the show, Emily said, you know, he just was so guileless. So I think she felt, even in an interview, when she was in the middle of interviewing him, that he wasn't a worthy opponent in some way.
Yes.
It was like a boxing match, and he wasn't able to match. You know, she was like, "Oh my God, it's too easy."
Yeah, wasn't
in a
match
way.
fit. Well,
Yeah.
yes, I see. To go back to what you said about news as entertainment, has it changed the way you now watch the news? And are you a news junkie? Were you a sort of Newsnight?
I'm a massive news junkie, and I listen to, read too much and listen to too much. And yeah, I think it does. It made me understand the sort of ecosystem of journalists and politicians, and they're all tied. You don't quite understand as a consumer of that how much they're all in cahoots with each other, and how much is negotiated, and it's a give and take thing, so you don't quite understand that.
Yes.
When you're consuming it, and it did make me think actually there's a sort of ruthlessness to it, and from every department. And I thought that's quite interesting. It doesn't make me stop reading the news or listening to it, but I think I do feel like it's become the biggest form of entertainment. I actually think, more than anything else. I mean, and now it used to be one thing that was quite hard talking to Emily was that it was very hard to get an opinion out of her because she'd been trained in impartiality and,
of course,
and actually she would always answer with a question.
Yes.
And but now everyone wants opinions.
Yes.
We listen to all these podcasts and it's all opinions.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. The facts and the just straight up story are not so interesting to people. They want opinions and they want entertainment. They want provocation. So it's what we're wanting to consume.
Yes. Yes.
But it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah. Do you get the feeling this will be an international success for Prime? Do you think the Royal Angle will put it over big in the States or in
I don't
Europe?
know. They've got a different relationship to the Royals. I mean, I don't know if the interview was that big out there. As big as it was here. I mean, it globally went around the world and people did know about it and talked about it. But I think it is very specific to the UK. Of course, we have such a much tighter relationship and closer relationship to the Royals here. But I don't know. I'm not sure how big Andrew is elsewhere outside of the UK. I mean, I'm sure he is, but I don't know. It'd be interesting.
There used to be a huge fascination, didn't there, in the States for the royal family that I think...
Oh, there still is in terms of, I mean, they love Kate and William and Harry and Meghan. And
but whether they love Andrew is another
whether
question,
the next generation, and that's the other thing. I'm sure they do, but it'd be interesting to see how it goes out there, yeah. Absolutely,
yes, yeah. Is there anything you took away from playing Emily? Is there anything you sort of that stayed with you?
Yeah, I mean, I loved her. She's got such a zest for life. I really enjoyed being in her presence, and I love the journalistic world. I think it's a really fast-paced, interesting, live by, the seat of your pants kind of existence. And it was different for me to perform that because I often play quite sort of, I think, quite reflective characters or outsiders and observers. So to play someone on the front foot, kind of always on the move, never thinking back, thinking forward the whole time.
Yes.
I sort of loved being in that, actually. It's very energising. So I thought being Emily must be quite fun being Emily. And I love being blonde. I was sort of like wanted to keep the wig.
Is that the first, or is that the first?
I've done blonde a few times, and I always enjoy it.
I was trying to think back over your career and different
Anna
hair
Christie
colours.
was blonde,
Yes,
and
that's right.
I've done a few blonde wigs, and I love them. So I'm like, okay, I've got to do more blonde.
Just to finish up, would you be keen to take on another sort of based in fact, based in reality, based on real well-known people project in the future? Or is
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the process of it, and it was. I loved collaborating with William and Alex on discovering who that person was, and I like I said, I found real people are so much more interesting than what your imagination can create. So. There's endless eccentricities and strangeness and wonderful things you find about people. And if I can do more of that, it's great. It does it all for you, does the work for you.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Ruth Wilson, thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick.
Lovely to see you.
You too.